Welcome to Native Exiles, Alderwood Community Church's podcast, where we talk about following Jesus in the tension of being in the world, but not of it. And we have another special guest today, a conversation I'm really looking forward to you hearing. Jeff Kaas, longtime Alderwood guy and a business owner in our local community here, a great friend of mine. We're talking about work today, and it's a really important topic because almost everybody works. I mean, really everybody works in some capacity, whether you're earning a paycheck or you're not. And so we're going to talk about how to think about that in light of God's story, in light of the Bible, and what especially Genesis 2 and 3 had to say about that. So I can't wait. Here we go. Jeff, so glad you're here. Thank you for doing this. We're talking about work today, and let's just start with you. For folks who don't know you, letting people know in your work life, where has God put you and how did you get there?
Yeah. That's a great question. So I realized I've been in the company I work for now for 40 years.
Wow.
Started when I was 15.
Congratulations.
My dad's business. He, at some point, bought the business from my mom. They got divorced, so he got to buy it from her. And then at some point, he decided to retire and give it to me.
And you were 15 at the time.
I was 30 when he decided to give it to me, and had it all set up to give it to me. And I realized, boy, I wanted to succeed at marriage and some of the other things in my life. So I just kind of walked out of the legal conversation saying, yeah, if you can't give this to my marriage, I can't accept it. So technically, my wife and I have owned, our marriage has owned this business for many years. Not a lot of
31-year-olds have the wisdom to see the impact that owning a business might bring to their marriage.
Yeah, there's a little bit of hurt involved with being, going through the process of being a kid of divorce, I think. Mm-hmm. So, and it wasn't wisdom. I mean, it was for sure from above. I look back and say, how did I...
It can be wisdom and be from above.
It was all above. It was, that's right. It was all from above, yeah. It wasn't smart, I'll say that, yeah. So, yeah. And so we have a company today that our primary business is to really grow people. We exist to shine light, and we just happen to do that through making furniture, airplane parts, and helping people redeem work by just knowing that work can be different. It doesn't have to be the toil that is promised.
Well, actually, I want to stop you right there because I just think I want people to get what you're saying. You just said your primary business is to grow people.
Yeah.
You happen to do that through making furniture. How else would you describe the physical stuff that you're producing? Furniture and aerospace and...
Yeah. So the company exists to shine light to our community. And so that means doing work that's excellent, do it together, and that's joyful. So we really are becoming more and more true around, it's fun to make stuff. Mm-hmm. So sofas and chairs and things that you might find in a Nordstrom store. We make flight attendant seats for airplanes, and the president, sits on our chair.
Yep.
We've sent some parts into space on spaceships.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which is really crazy. But
the reason I want to jump in is because this is why I'm excited to talk to you about work. That is such a radically different way of thinking about business from what everybody is probably used to thinking. Because if I looked at a balance sheet of your company, I guess I'm not a business person. That's not even the right term.
Okay.
If I look at a revenue
we'll go with that one. You're good.
Spreadsheet or whatever, the bulk of your revenue is not coming from growing people.
No.
So that's how most people would talk about the main part of our business. The main part of business is what brings in the most money.
Yeah.
And if you were to describe it that way, you'd say the main part of our business is making furniture and aerospace stuff and all that. Yeah. But that's not how you think. The main part of your business is growing people.
Yeah. And if we become more and more true to that mission, then I think we're closer to it being ministry. And it shouldn't be a surprise that if we just love people through work, that they'll do excellent work. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a price that a customer's willing to pay for a chair, and the suppliers need money for materials, and our employees deserve a great wage. And there's a really tight feedback loop. What I mean by that is you sell a chair and you get money, and there's an easy way to measure that. When we're growing people, the feedback loop can be a generation or two.
Yeah.
So, and I don't expect to have the profit from that investment coming back to me.
Yep.
It's really not mine to have. So it's the measures that you could come up with business don't measure this. So,
You're speaking my language, Jeff. I mean, this is ministry.
they don't,
right?
yeah. Well,
how do we measure it? How long do we wait to see the fruit of ministry work and people's lives and all that? Yeah. Okay. I love thinking differently about work, and I would love to say that Christians have a totally different view of work than the world does, but I'm not actually sure that's true. I think we should.
Yeah.
The reason why we're talking about work is because we started our church reading through the Bible this year, calling this a year of God's story, trying to understand the whole story of Scripture as revealing God to us, pointing us to Jesus. And right away, early in the story, you get the garden, God's good intention, and there's this thing here that I think blows people's minds, which is that work is a pre-fall thing in Genesis.
Yeah.
He creates Adam and Eve in his image, invites them to rule on his behalf, to subdue creation, to cultivate the land. So he's inviting them to work before sin.
Yeah.
And most of us don't thank God for the opportunity to work. We think work is a necessary evil of sorts. A couple months ago, the lottery was up to some big number, and news companies were running this stuff and asking all kinds of people, what would you do if you won the lottery? Everyone's first answer, quit my job.
Yeah, sad, yeah.
So why is it that Christians and the whole world don't see work the way that you're trying to see work, the way that you're trying to get us to think about work?
Yeah, well, I can't speak for everybody else. All I can say is God's clear. So Genesis 2, he's talking about his day of rest. He said, I completed my work.
Yeah.
So we know God worked.
Yeah.
And then, when Jesus talks about the work of God, it's a believing in him. Yeah. And Revelations ends with talking about work.
Which, again, blows people's minds. Work is not just this thing that existed here, future, new heavens, new earth. When we're with Jesus, work is going to be there too.
Yeah. So I don't know what other people think. I know for me, I had a separation of church and state kind of in my head, which is, I'm a soccer coach. When I had kids that were of that age, I'm married, kind of the marriage and coming to church is my family's ministry or whatever. At some point, I learned, I think, through just studying the Word and actually reading the Bible kind of end to end and starting to really consider, oh my goodness, the work is my field. This is my ministry.
Yeah.
And I really consider all Christians are called to vocational ministry, no different. I see your role, my role. The money comes from something. It's not from a man or a woman. It's from God. So, yeah.
Well, that's pretty good news because most people are going to spend a whole heck of a lot more time at their job than they are at church. Not a lot of folks in our church family are spending 40 plus hours a week at church stuff, nor do we want them to. So to understand that what your job is, where God's called you to work is ministry, I think is a pretty big thing to get. Yeah. You say you can't speak for other people, but you have observed a lot of people, because I don't know if we said this earlier, but in addition to making stuff, growing people in your own company, you also are growing people outside of your company. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we started learning about the principles that govern work, and thankfully a company named Toyota codified. They studied how does work get done in a way that is efficient and awesome, and people wrote some books about it. So at a really high level, human beings really love to create value, and we don't like wasting much. And so we started learning from them, didn't realize that they had discovered the laws of the universe or God's creation or anything, just, hey, it kind of works. And copied them. We just said, hey, they allow people to tour them, so we allowed people to tour us. And my honest, real reason was I figured we'd find the hole in their system and prove it wrong.
There you go.
I could tell everybody. Which isn't that different than I live my faith, by the way. So at some point we had over 40,000 people in our building to talk about work and talk about what does it look like to work where we're working in flow versus working in the way that kind of we're set up in most places. So I'd say now it's probably about 50,000 people who we've spent time with in our building for 4 hours to look at, okay, could we look at it differently? Regardless of your worldview.
And why do you invite these people to come? I mean, when you think about, you host these tours, people are coming, they're seeing what you're doing, they're learning. Yeah. Like what drives you to do that?
Yeah, the initial drive was, okay, find the holes. Probably about 3 or 4 years in, so maybe 10,000 people in, we're like, oh, there's no holes.
Yeah.
And I really felt like a calling, like, well, it's our job to share what we know, and of course try to make a living. The internal benefit was, when a doctor or a nurse or a leader of a tech company comes in and speaks to one of my colleagues where English is a second or third language who's sewing, there's a whole bunch of love and respect communicated by that tour guest to my colleague in a way that I can't communicate. So there's been mutual blessing all the way through. And at some point, the question was, hey, why do you do this for free? So about 3 or 4 years ago, we started realizing, this is kind of what the world needs. So, more recently it has become, part of our business is to really get after that and share it.
So you're seeing mutual benefit both ways.
Yeah.
Why do the people who show up come?
Has always been word of mouth. And I think it's like it's come see the zoo or come to the Gong Show. No idea. Really, it's like, there's crazy people. I don't know. My sense is enough people come and hear and see and are convicted that work can be different.
Yeah.
They tell enough of their friends, and then they end up showing up on our doorstep. Yeah.
Well, I've been one of those people.
Yeah.
I've brought some people in. I mean, you're saying it very nicely. They have a conviction that work can be better. I think people are coming because they think this sucks. Like, what is happening now in my job, in our communication, in our systems? Like, this is not working out.
Yeah.
There's got to be something better out there. And if they hear from a friend or from somebody, Kaas has got something figured out, you should go check it out.
Yeah.
People are hungry to figure out how work can be better, I think.
Yeah.
And when you bring these folks in, that is kind of where you start, right? You ask them, let's talk about work. Share some of your experiences of starting off with folks that are coming in for a tour.
Yeah, we try to back up from work completely. And we really just start with, hey, your current employer is, your current employer. We're here to speak to you as a human being and serve you and your family. So we kind of walk them through a discovery process. We talk a lot about hobby and just ask them questions about, hey, what do you get from your hobby? And there's a lot of nice things people get from their hobby. And they start smiling and their bodies change.
Yeah. And mine's golf, so that's what I think about when you ask that question.
Yeah, great. So you start thinking about the words that come from spending time doing your hobby. Then we compare that to the words or feelings that come from work.
So what do people say when they're talking about their hobby?
It's my favorite. I feel free. I feel energized. I feel tired but good. I feel in community, a sense of purpose. I feel connected. And we write all those words down in green if they're great words, and we use the red pen. The only red that you would normally hear with hobby is it's expensive.
Yeah. I'm picturing golf right now.
Everything
about it.
I'm a skier, not cheap. Yeah. And then as we guide them through the work, it's heartbreaking. Really, there's a lot of pain. So you start
more
writing
ready.
Down.
Yeah.
Tell me what your family hears. What are we teaching to our kids? You have a partner at home or somebody who loves you, a parent.
Yeah.
What are the feelings, the words that come? And
when I've been in that room doing that exercise, it seems like stress is one of the first words out of people's mouth. I mean, what words are common?
I feel like a slave. I feel like a slave to these things. Political, lack of trust, lack of teamwork. Of course, you'll hear some of the good words too. Well,
especially if their boss is in the room with them.
Sometimes that, but also the honest part is they'll start to see that, hobby and work, there's some words that are similar, and those words that are similar are the green words.
Yeah.
I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm being challenged.
Yeah.
But work is the one that's loaded with all these, very unhealthy. We try to connect those red words to things they might care about, like their health, their relationships, and other things. And
Well, I mean, I got the opportunity once to be a fly on the wall while you were going through this exercise with a bunch of healthcare folks from Holland and
that's right.
People who know the body really well, know biology, how we were created. And, you have all these words thrown out about how they feel about work, stress, anxiety, all that stuff. And you just ask the question, you guys are doctors. What does this do to you long term if this is your world? If you're living in stress, if you're living in high anxiety, if you're living in frustration, and they knew it hurts you. It takes years off of your life if this is how your world is.
Yeah.
And so what are you doing for folks when you're putting hobby and work next to each other like this? What are you trying to get them to see?
Yeah, what we're trying to do is give them the opportunity to know the truth, and the truth can set them free from being a slave to this stuff. Yeah. So really high level. When we have those words up there, there's a couple questions that we'll ask. First is somebody in the world getting paid to do your hobby right now? Is it work for somebody? And for golf or skiing, whatever, the answer is almost always yes. It's somebody's job. So my worldview is different than many of the people that visit us, but we can agree that work, when it's done well, feels like hobby.
It can be, at least.
Yes. Oh, and
yeah.
And you can ask a few more questions. Have you ever worked on a Saturday and just got your stuff done? And they light up. Like, oh, yeah, I've done that. Okay, great. So you stole from your family in order to get the work done, but it felt good. So in a secular world, that's part of it. At some point along there, the Christians in the room are going, hey, something's cooking here. Yeah. But so we give 2 tours on every tour. One is to the believer who has the Holy Spirit, who could go, oh, this is just the gospel. Like this, when Jesus talks about his burden is easy, yoke is light, I probably have that backwards, he means it. And so then the next question, is it morally okay to design work in such a way that we harm people, even in Seattle?
I remember the first time you asked that question.
Yeah.
Because I'm with you. I'm like, yeah, waste is bad, and like this could be better. And and then that question, okay, yeah, there's waste in your job. There's things that aren't working. Is that just like bummer?
Yeah.
Or is that actually a moral wrong? If you have any kind of leadership, which I did at the time, of how you set up the system, you as the boss, is it morally okay for you to allow your system to be harming the people that God has trusted you to come and be a part of your company? And I just remember going, yikes.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did. I meant to do that to you, but yes.
I know you did.
Exactly,
but I mean, I have never thought about overseeing people the same way that... Yeah, it is my moral responsibility as a follower of Jesus to help the people that God has trusted who work for me to not have the red word everything about work, and to actually be able to get some joy out of this, and to see purpose, and to have, in your words, flow in work and all of that. And so we are really trying to say, is it a business problem or a moral problem? And frankly, when we talk about training kids, I hope we still teach the kids about moral problems before we worry about business. And in this case here, for me, as a Christian, we might say, hey, is it okay to be a stumbling block? Causing others harm by designing a system that hurts them. And none of us want that, Christian or non-Christian. Well, I mean, you talked about kind of the sacred secular divide, the church, the way that we kind of split church stuff from work stuff. Because I think most Christians, if you ask that question as a parent, is it okay for you to parent in a way that is a stumbling block to your kids, that makes their life miserable, that doesn't help them to experience joy and fullness? Everybody's gonna be like, no, of course not. That's not okay. Right. But we just see work in a different category. We just it's almost like everything we believe about the way that God created the universe and what He calls us to, admit, like we just don't apply that to our jobs often. Yet we're getting there. So you, with some help from Toyota, learned about, in the business context, the things that are causing waste and toil. And in our Genesis context, that's what happens to work in the fall. It's not that work shows up. It's that work becomes toil.
It's the weeds, the thorns and thistles.
And I love that you use that imagery when you're doing your tours, the weeds.
They're just the weeds in the garden. And it makes sense for everybody in the garden to know the difference between weeds and corn. So it became, well, how do we remove weeds? Well, we've got to make sure we can identify them. And so we start teaching, hey, there's some named weeds and there's different tools for those weeds. But
So you figured out the 7 wastes, the 7 weeds. And then pretty smooth sailing from there?
That's awesome. Not smooth sailing.
So, I mean, what challenges have you faced? Like, you have this conviction as this is a moral responsibility for you to remove waste for your folks, to bring joy. What has made that a difficult journey?
I think the hardest part for me is just the between the 2 ears here. So it's just not understanding that it's always true. And in my own growth as a Christian is to, at some point, realize every part of the Bible is relevant to my work. So, and it didn't happen until I was probably 40 years old, where at some point I realized, oh, my garden is the business. It's the things I'm doing there. So the biggest part is just learning to know what's true or false. And I think that's why I'm excited that we are going, through the Bible together this year. I believed in Jesus, but I had never read the Bible. Until I started doing youth ministry, the guy's like, well, what part of the Bible do you like? I'm like, the red words, I haven't read all that other stuff. And now it's an adventure of a lifetime if you start looking through. The challenges are always, I think, at any level, it's our own journey, and for me, it was my unwillingness to cooperate with my Maker. Like, he wrote the book. Jeff, could you read it? Hello, you know. So I'm looking for him to answer prayer, and he's like, just read the book. It's right here. Yeah. And then once you've read it a couple of times, you'll learn, some of the stuff. So, it really, for us, there's no policy, no decision, nothing in the business that we don't think through the word before we do it. So, yeah.
Well, and so you're saying that, and I've seen that in your life and in your business a ton, but just so people get the context that we're talking about, how many folks work for you at Kaas?
We have about 150 now. We were up to 220 before. Yeah.
And they're all Christians, right?
Yeah. No.
Because I can imagine, like, people are thinking that you run a business and it's just like, 5 Christian dudes who your Bibles are always open at your desk. No, you have a very diverse group of people working for you. Some who share your values, some who don't.
Yeah.
Has that been a tension? How do you think about leading your people with the principles from the Word, thinking everything through the Word without forcing belief in Jesus on people who aren't there yet?
Well, the funny thing is, even Jesus didn't force belief in Jesus, right? Nope. So we're called to love Him and love our neighbors. And so we can go through all the things even we talked about in last year at the church is how do we show them more love and more respect to people? And the great thing about the Bible is it is always true.
Even if you don't believe in Jesus,
it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Right.
So, we absolutely want to use the knowledge that's in the Bible to form policy. Yeah. But if you actually just look at the core of our people strategy, it's, hey, how do we show this person more love? How do we show them more respect? They need more no matter what. And for me, I'm not going to, I will share my faith. I will share exactly what we're doing. But I also, before I was a Christian, I didn't really want to hear you tell me, how to, be a Christian. But I was really aware of people who loved people. Yeah. And honestly, Jesus talks about being a shepherd and, his sheep know his name. So I don't see it as my job to convince people of anything. It is my job to shine light. And, when we've done something well, to point at, who made that happen. Yep. And, but also be willing to respect and love them no matter what. Because it doesn't say, hey, just love the ones who believe what you believe.
Absolutely.
And And I value the diverse thought. I value all these things that come with the cultures that we have. Yeah. Yeah. So it is pretty weird, though. I can say that when I write the word in our purpose document that we will love and respect people here, I do get quite a bit of pushback from some. Yeah. That
should not be a part of your...
Yeah, so it's so weird. Well, how do I measure love? Someone's trying to put a metric on it, and we give tours like, well, this love and respect. Like, do you love your kids? Do you have like a chart for that? Like, come on, seriously. Yeah. So...
I have a chart for my kids.
Yeah, of course we do. We all do, yeah.
Love mostly just means not hitting at this stage for us. But yeah.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
You talked early on about coming to the understanding that your work is your ministry. Yeah. And I want people to get that doesn't just mean work is a place where you can tell people about Jesus. No. It means the actual work of what you're doing, of creating value for the world, for other people, helping people grow. That is ministry in and of itself. Yeah. That being said, have you seen the way that you have implemented scriptural values, thinking through the word in your business, be an on-ramp for some folks to considering Jesus in ways that they hadn't, in asking about your faith, in wanting to know more about the Bible and why you do what you do? Do you see any people from outside the church asking curious questions?
That's a good question. What I I look at whether I'm a seed planter or a harvester. And so I think what we want to be aware of is I'm not sure that I'll get to see the harvest, but it doesn't excuse me from planting seeds. Yep. So far in my life, it's really the discovery, the adventure of learning, like all the science that Dr. Jeff talked about last week. It's like, okay, God made all that stuff, and he's just like on an adventure to learn about God and see how he made us all. I wouldn't say the harvest is part of, I'm not sure that's my role in life. I think we're planters and advocates for the things that God cares about. And I don't know, we'll talk about it. Yeah. But I'm not sure I can say that we have seen that.
I think there's some wisdom just in understanding that that's how God works. He doesn't give us necessarily perfect insight into the way that he's bringing fruit from everything that we do. Yeah. We have to trust him that he brings the growth. We might plant, somebody else might water. God's the one who brings the growth.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. I would love to see it, but that's maybe when we get to heaven, we go, oh wow, when we care for that person. Yeah. You cared for me, right? So.
What about from another lens, just in seeing growth in the people that work for you? What are you seeing that's really encouraging you right now?
Oh yeah, it's shocking. Yeah, and they don't work for me; they work for themselves.